Mindfulness teaches you how to manage your own fear and anxiety and how to be present with kindness, how to bring forth your joy and your love even in difficult situations. We can learn these inner powers just as we have outer powers. The best translation for the word mindfulness is loving awareness. Because, JBH, you said it, how do you bring the head and the heart together? You do it in a moment when you're paying attention with both the head and the heart.
Family, welcome to a truly special conversation with Jack Kornfield. Jack is a pioneer in bringing mindfulness to the Western world, and after training as a Buddhist monk in Thailand, India, and Burma, he co-founded the Insight Meditation Society and Spirit Rock Center. Jack is touching countless lives through his compassionate teachings and his 16 books, including A Path with Heart and The Wise Heart, have sold over 2 million copies worldwide. With his unique gift for blending Eastern wisdom and Western psychology, Jack offers us guidance for navigating life's challenges with an open heart and steady presence. So sit back, whatever you're doing, sitting, standing, driving, just enjoy this conversation with Jack Kornfield. Jack Kornfield, welcome. The concept of great turning that Joanna Macy describes as a great opportunity for us to reset our lives as human beings is resonating throughout much of your recent teaching. And no matter where we are in the world today, nor what we're about, we are living in a multi-pivoting time. How might this pivotal moment in our history as human beings call forth new expressions of compassion from folks who are feeling overwhelmed by what many see as a global crisis? And I say that with no political indication to it, simply to gain your brilliant perspective on it, and perhaps in doing so, a little bit of guidance to us.
So I don't know about the brilliant part, but I want to pick up, thank you, JBH. I want to pick up on what you called Joanna Macy's great turning. She's been an inspiration for me, and now she's 94 and still teaching. And what she means by the great turning is that modern exploitive late-stage capitalist society has increased the divide between the rich and the poor. It has created the kind of extinction crisis and climate crisis that is driving refugees across the deserts and seas of the world. And it's lost the recognition that we belong to each other, that we're in it together. It has the notion of the individual and get as much as you can, which has lost the indigenous wisdom, the wisdom of the elders, the wisdom of the ages. And so her notion is, in the Great Turning, that we have to remake the foundations, the vision of how we live as human beings, from being one primarily of exploiting the earth and one another, to one of interconnection, compassion, and support. And of course, the place to start to do that, to revision our society and our order in the world from a place of mutual care rather than mutual fear, which is it's being ruled by now, just to be clear. There's a cultural anxiety that we all share kind of collectively. And a lot of politics is about fear. And 100 years ago, Mencken, the political commentator, said the main rule of popular politics is to frighten the people so that they will vote for you and frighten them against all the different so-called enemies. It was the communists or the immigrants or the brown or the black or the red or the yellow, somebody who's different than you. And Joanna Macy says, this isn't who we are. And you know it too, JBH, and I do, that we're more noble and better than that in all kinds of ways, and we have known that. And then one more thing to say. It's really clear that technology is not going to save us. No amount of computers and AI, no amount of increasing, technology in all the different areas of education, medicine, all these great things are going to stop continuing warfare. They're not going to stop continuing racism. They're not going to stop continuing climate destruction, because all these are born in the human heart. And so the great turning of Joanna Macy's is really calling for a transformation of humanity from greed, from fostering hatred, and fostering ignorance and lack of truth, into turning greed into generosity and hatred into love and ignorance into wisdom. Now that's a mouthful I just gave, but
It is a mouthful, and I'm going to ask you to lean in even deeper into it. There are two things that came to mind for me as you were talking.
sure.
One is about, and you cited recent, from a historical perspective, examples of greed and
Hatred,
yeah,
ignorance.
uh-huh. Hasn't that been the case throughout written history, that as human beings we and there are always pod opportunities where, like during the great wars, England really pulled itself together as a nation, where prior they had division as a nation. But we've had this going on for a long time, is the first thing I want you to lean into. The second thing that you said, and it was a light bulb moment. Actually, you said technology isn't going to save us. What I didn't hear you continue to say is, and it likely could. So I don't know that you agree with that, but I'd love your thought on that.
Is really a cosmic kind of question. Are we going to do away with human suffering? No, because being born, I don't know if you have any kids, but the birth process itself has suffering in it. And then human life and has illness and death. So we're not going to do away with that. But what is true is this, and I was at the first White House Buddhist gathering, Buddhist leaders gathering, not under the current administration, shall we say, back under a different president. And after these leaders, and they had communities all around the country that did beautiful things, that fed the homeless and, supported people who were lost, and gave support to children and education, all kinds of tremendously great things, like lots of beautiful spiritual communities do. Um, I was sort of invited to summarize the meeting, the gathering together. And I said, the things that you've offered, which I just talked about the benefit of compassion for each other, of caring for one another rather than greed and ignorance, these are eternal verities. They're there in the best of Christian teachings. They're there from Socrates and from Lao Tzu in China. Here's what we have to add to it. We actually have practices that help you develop compassion, a deep mindful listening, a loving attention to one another, that help you develop the capacity to be present for what's beautiful and what's painful with an open heart, so that it's not just an ideal, but that it's actually possible for us as human beings. And it has to start with us. It's not something out there, but that we can learn to do this. We can learn to trust that the heart's big enough to hold all the tears, and also to hold the magnificent beauty of the world, and then respond from a place of care rather than to respond from a place of fear. And so the beautiful thing is that there actually are trainings and practices that can change your heart and change your life. Now, will that make the world all better? I wish it were so. But in the Buddhist teachings, he said, if there's a society where people treat each other with respect, where people take care of the vulnerable, the young and the old and the sick, where they take care of their environment, that society will prosper and people will be happy. So that's the path for us, and it's an invitation, individually and collectively.
I love that so much. And I think most human beings love that. Let's weave that toward where we are now, where we're not just human beings who are living on the earth and needing to figure out how to cooperate. And inclusive of, I think, a lot of things that probably are subtext to you, like sustaining the environment and those kinds of things, or bringing it back, depending on where you think we are in that line of occurrences, and tie it to that we are now humans and humanoid in terms of AI, the AI-ness of things. So help us a little bit on that, even for those who, and a lot of people, I think, Jack, may really believe what we believe about we are responsible to each other as well as for each other, and not demonstrate that. And I'm curious about the breakdown of that as we enter a stronger age of technology. Are those?
Well, it's a really powerful question, and I've been fortunate to be part of the dialogues and maybe even a mentor to some of the top AI leaders. I have been. And part of what they've turned to question together is how do we make it ethical? How do we keep the power of technology so that it has benefit for humanity? And that's not all clear. Even the people with good hearts and good intention haven't figured out quite how to do it. What is true is that you have to start with that intention. If you start with the intention of competition, we're going to kick butt and, trounce China and anybody else, and we'll be the kings of the technology world. That intention of grasping and power over is going to get imbued in the work you do. But in fact, if you start with that intention is the most powerful thing. Then gradually it leads you in the course to figure out how to do it. And nobody's ever done it. The great novelist, uh, uh, um, Somerset Maugham, said there are three rules for writing the great English novel. He went on, unfortunately, no one knows what they are. And there's something that's true. We have to also have a kind of humility that we don't know. But what we can rely on is to turn back. What is my highest intention? And can I begin to listen? And it's true with AI, and that's a huge thing that's happening, but it's equally true in your family. If you're having a conflict with someone and, they want to be right and you want to be right and they did it this, the best thing you can do is to take a pause and take a deep breath and ask inside, what's my best intention? What's my highest intention? In 30 seconds, you do that. And almost always your tone of voice changes. Instead of like, what did you mean? And you're kind of angry. You can even say the same words, what did you mean? But you're curious and kind. What's going on with you?
Kind of like when you put the mirror in front of yourself, if you're going to be having a difficult conversation with someone, to help you stay focused on where they are by seeing how you're feeding into or responding.
Yes. And you ask yourself, what's my best intention? And is it to be right? Or is your best intention to love, to be happy? And they're very which would you rather, be right or be happy, be right or rest in love? So the capacity to be present and listen to your own heart, and then set the compass in the direction of your intention in the smallest ways and the closest personal ones, or in the work you do in the world, your work as an entrepreneur, the leaders of AI, that intention becomes absolutely critical.
It is critical. And one of the things I've asked all of my teams who are engaged in any uh, in at any level in any way in the technology we deliver to and through is to make sure we are ethically engaging technology, and that means we have to start in front of delivering it into the design, which is
That's right. That's correct.
of it. And so I've been watching Jack. Um, I haven't been watching. I watched last night the first few episodes of a show that's running on Netflix called Watson. And Watson is portrayed by Morris Chestnut as a modern day Watson post Sherlock Holmes passing. And he has, through the gift of Sherlock Holmes and his own work, this theater of young doctors, and they are approaching their work from the detective perspective. One of the episodes is about a young woman who has a set of illnesses that are all recurring around her having sickle cell. You're familiar with sickle cell?
I am indeed. Yeah.
And so for our family who may not be, sickle cell is a disease in the blood that can be devastating and debilitating and generally leads to early death. And it has been historically thought of as a Black person's disease. Watson says somewhere in that episode, Jack, the thing that kept us alive and protected us from malaria is killing us in the new world. And so I don't know where people buy the science around how it's limited or how it differs from any other blood disease that has been, attached to people around their biology and ethnicity. But here's the point I'm getting to. He knows there is a cure, a solution for this lady's illness. It has not gone through the FDA regulations and processes to make it legal to deliver. So, in fact, not only would he be breaking the law, he may be ending up putting himself in prison to do it. And he challenges himself with the show is going to be a series of these types of episodes that examine modern day illnesses or lesser known but grave illnesses against the ability we have to solve for them. From a biological or medical perspective, but not from a political or financial perspective. And I don't know if it's heart versus head or if it's good versus evil, how we do it, but it lines up like that. In this particular episode, I don't want to cheat it for people who haven't seen it. So I'll just say he makes a decision, and it becomes a decision that has to be a team decision because everybody who participates is going to be, present to the same outcome that he would be. When we look at that type of circumstance, where do we line it up toward the ability and the capacity to do good framed inside of regulations that were intended to help us all coexist as a group population?
Yeah. Well, you're asking a deep moral question. It was the question that Gandhi wrestled with, because Gandhi was trained as a very well trained as a lawyer and respected the law. And he said, but there are rules that have been created that actually cause suffering. And because I see it, I can't unsee it. And because I have a moral responsibility to the benefit of myself and others, I choose publicly to say, I cannot follow this law. And then he got thrown into prison. He said, okay, but I want people to see, he said, that from my moral best intention, my highest intention, that in fact, this is the value that matters to us. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be that easy, and not everybody is Gandhi, and certainly I'm not. Um, but in these times, especially, we're we're starting to be asked. Yes, things may be legitimate or legal. What do we stand for? Just as you might ask yourself, what's my highest intention in a conflict, and your tone of voice changes. When you have these moral dilemmas, what do I stand for? And you may not completely know, but you can feel it. There's something intuitive, the best we can know. And in that show, he had to wrestle with this. There's no simple answer. Somebody asked the Dalai Lama, you know, if you could shoot one person who was about to murder a group of people, would you do it? These are sort of like these hypothetical things. Would it be okay to do it? He said, it might be the right thing, but I couldn't do it.
Mhm. My mom used to tell us all the time, and I'll frame it the way one of my spiritual advisors, Reverend J.L. Armstrong, put it to me years ago. I was lamenting with him that there was something that I really wanted to do that I couldn't do. I shouldn't say couldn't, that I hadn't brought myself the strength and the ability to do yet. And he said, well, there are two answers to that I'll give you. And they're simple. One is, if you can't do it and you believe it should be done, can you help to get it done? And he referenced, like, I can't teach my children the math at home they need to support what they do in school, but I can afford to pay someone to help them get that. The second thing he said to me, and it stuck with me, Jack, he said, know your ministry. You're not going to be the answer to everything. You can provide an answer into anything, which was kind of an iteration of the first. And throughout your teachings, particularly in no time like the present, the relationship between compassion and awareness emerges as central for you. When these qualities work together rather than separately, what transformation becomes possible? We're talking about, the heart versus the head, but what is possible? And not just ethereally, right now where we're living, where you've already cited circumstances that you consider needing to be solved.
Of course they do. And anybody who's paying attention now sees the problems. I'm touched by the question as much by the source of care that's behind it in you, that it matters. And the beautiful advice you got from your mentor, Reverend, to say, do what you can. And if you can't do it, help someone else do it, because you know it has to happen. Somebody came to me, yes, there's AI, another field of modern technology questions is genetic engineering and CRISPR. We now have the capacity to change our human genome. Should we do it? Should we pick what our children look like? I mean, this is science fiction, but it turns out now it's possible. And I had this person from the State Board of Bioethics come to me and say, we're wondering about the ethics of growing human organs in pigs. We could grow pancreas, or we could grow, heart or something like that now genetically in a pig, and then use it to transplant it into a human being, which might save their life. Is that ethical? He wanted me to kind of give a Buddhist answer. And I said, well, the Buddhist answer is to do what causes the least harm or what's most beneficial. He said, yeah, but what does that mean? I said, well, the problem is that it's not philosophical. It's about the pig. And then he laughed, and I said, I'm serious. I said, I have a friend who's a really skilled shaman, and if you want, I'll get him, and we'll go to where the lab where they're working with the animals. He'll go into a kind of shamanic state, and he'll talk to the pig and see what the pig feels about it. Now, this guy laughed because it was sort of wacky to say that.
I grew up in an area where there were pig whisperers, so we didn't
Yeah,
call it whisperers back then.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there were
But
people who
but
talked.
he also understood that there's an intelligence that's beyond just our own, that we have to listen more deeply. So all this is happening, and there are these ethical issues of the kinds that you've raised. I think this is really important to me. The training of mindfulness, which has become very widespread, and you hear mindfulness in business and mindfulness in education and so forth, it's really good. It's the capacity we can learn how to really pay attention. Because in school, I learned reading, writing, arithmetic. Nobody taught me how to pay attention. And they didn't teach me how to pay attention to my own fear or anger or confusion or love or longing. That wasn't in the curriculum. But we actually need to learn how to do that. It wasn't in school. So mindfulness teaches you how to manage your own fear and anxiety and how to be present with kindness, how to bring forth your joy and your love, even in difficult situations. We can learn these inner powers just as we have outer powers. The best translation for the word mindfulness is loving awareness, because JBH, you said it. How do you bring the head and the heart together? You do it in a moment when you're paying attention with both the head and the heart. Let me read you a poem,
Yes, please.
okay, by Stella Nasanovich, called Everyday Grace. It can happen like that, meeting at the tire repair center, buying new tires amidst the smell of rubber or the grating sound of jackhammers and drills. Anywhere we share stories, grace flows between us. The tire center waiting room becomes a healing place as one speaks of her husband's heart valve replacement, bed sores from complications. A man speaks of multiple surgeries, notes his false appearance as strong and healthy. I share my sister's death from breast cancer, her youngest only 7. A woman rises, gives her name, Mrs. Henry, then takes my hand. Suddenly, an ordinary day becomes holy ground. And so, what this poem invites, because you can feel it as I read it, is invites us to remember to see with the eyes of loving awareness. And that we can learn to do this, we can practice it. And whether it's individual or collective at work, as an entrepreneur or other things, it allows us to make decisions that are both from the head and the heart. So, which is why meditation is helpful. Not because you need to have some special meditation experience. Okay, you can take some drugs and do that too, which is fine. I've done that. But no, it's because you get quiet and you can listen to your heart. You can listen to what really matters and then act from it.
So you bring up meditation, Jack, and you've invested decades of bringing Buddhist mindfulness to Western audiences. What are some of the fundamental misunderstandings about meditation practice that still are persisting, and that you think may create unnecessary struggle for the practitioners?
Well, JBH, do you meditate?
I think I do, but I don't know if and I thought about it a lot before you coming on. And I have Buddhist friends. As a matter of fact, one of my most senior level executives is a member of a Buddhist family, and his mother just passed away. Um, and so I think I do.
What do you do?
And let me tell you why.
Yeah.
I do have dedicated moments and I have non dedicated but needed moments where I go into a very quiet space and I ask myself permission to not ask, to not offer anything other than my quiet toward awareness. I say that because as a Christian based, and I'm Southern, Christian based person, we call Jesus a lot. And we have prayers of petition. We have prayers of intervention. We have all kinds of prayers we just go into. And I enjoy them.
Yes.
And I believe that I'm fed from them. There are times when I want to enjoy the greatness of the world, and I don't identify as me, nor do I identify as with a God creator. I just want to be quiet and hear what the universe offers me. And I think those are my moments of meditation. And let me share lastly with you around my answer to that, Jack. Um, I've had that happen a lot since COVID. And COVID wasn't necessarily that big startling moment in my life because, as a person of faith and Southern Christian person of faith, Jesus helped me through it. I was good, and I had thoughts and answers and prayers for circumstances that didn't land as well as mine did. Um, so this thing about meditation, and I'm putting thing in quotes with a capital T, has led me to really want to talk with you today and find out from you, how is meditation? Does it differ than prayer, or is it just the meaning we put on it?
So thank you. Thank you for talking about your own inner practice, because we need to share that in this culture. And I've been called to mentor top CEOs of the 20 biggest companies in America. And they'll ask me, how do I do this? I mean, some of it's been very public. I got a call from my very good friend, Bill Ford, who at that time was the CEO of Ford Motors. And I work with a lot of CEOs. And he'd been reading meditation things and listening to my podcasts or my teachings. And it was in 2008 with the economic meltdown. And he called. He said, "I need to talk to you." He said, Chrysler and GM both declared bankruptcy. Ford is on the edge, although they did better. I'm about to lose my grandfather's company and our whole industry on my watch, and I can't sleep.
Mm.
What you got, basically, So this is really meditation in the foxhole, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I taught him a couple of practices, um, you know, and your meditation is a beautiful one. What you described, it's a really beautiful
It's
meditation.
what it's what my Buddhist doctor taught me to do. He is an acupuncturist.
Yeah,
And I had a terrible accident, Jack. I'll share this with you because I want to hear the continuation of what you're saying aligned with your knowledge of what I'm sharing.
yeah,
Um, we were landing on a plane, and the plane had come to a stop, and the little ding came on for us to stand up. I stood up, and right behind me was a man who was big in girth and had one of those big old school briefcases with the sharp corners that
sure.
hit me right here.
Oh,
And
wow.
face went devastated. And I was due to speak at NBC that next day. I called Marcia, the lady who was at, invited me to come speak, and say, I can't do it. And she would, no, you can't. No, my face is a wreck. I have to, don't worry. They won't think. And I put business first and a friend first and wore the big, Southern California glasses and went in and spoke. My brother was there to recover from me if I needed it. And then I was rushed over to a doctor. And the doctor told me I had two choices. I could do the surgery or not, but he said that it was a 50-50 chance that I'd come out better. And that was a lot to undergo. And there was a chance I could come out worse because the nerve in here had been so damaged. And
Oh,
when you
terrible.
look at me speak, you can see it in my mouth, or if I get overly tired, it starts to,
Oh,
you can see the difference.
yeah, yeah.
But at that point, I was scaring small children. I'm in a recovered state that I came home in tears. And my son said, well, Mom, don't worry about how you look. get to where you need to feel, because people learn more from you when you're sharing what you're feeling and thinking than how you look. And my daughter said, I get that it hurt to laugh. Literally, it hurt. And I'm a
Ow,
laugher.
ow, ow, ow.
So she said, let's try something different. And she took me to see Dr. John Kim, who practices acupuncture in the South Bay in California. And he said, look, let me just see if I can make you comfortable and we'll go from there. What she and he had talked about was actually putting me through a series of treatment that would be wellness. It would be how I ate. It would naturally include the acupuncture, and it would include meditation. And this sounded really weird to me when my face was like this. Okay, I was really, really, like I said, Jack, I scare small children. Well, we got there, and after he had got me comfortable and proceeded with his needles for about an hour, I sat
Yeah.
up, and he handed me a mirror. And the first part of his service to me was the quiet, and he said, I'm going to meditate in your presence, and I want
Mm.
just clear yourself and feel the energy. Don't force yourself to feel, just lay as close to lifeless as you can. So I laid there, and he has such a beautiful and gentle yet strong presence. Then he proceeded with the needles. After an hour of that service, when he showed me that mirror, I had already begun to reshape in my face. Now, people look at me and think, you're so practical. How can you tell that kind of stuff? It is my truth. And I come from a place where, you give testimony to the truth, right? I don't know. I think, you can understand me saying that. And so from there was when I learned the value of, I'm not giving up my prayer. I'm not giving up my Lord's Prayer, our Father, I'm adding. And what I was sharing with you is that it seems since COVID, I've been adding a lot more meditation because I'm working with so many people who feel themselves in states of distraught.
Yes.
Too much for you to get to what I'm actually asking you, or can you help me with that?
Well, first, again, I'm both sorry for what happened to you, and I'm kind of cheering you on because I was going to ask you what helps, and you found what helped. And it wasn't just taking the first kind of Western medical, okay, well, maybe we'll do surgery, but you found something deeper, and it combined the outer and the inner. That, all right, here's some treatment, and acupuncture is powerful. I've seen it
Mm.
change people, but also that doctor said, you can heal yourself. And the body's doing that all the time. People don't realize there's a tremendous healing power in the body. The other thing is that your meditation and your prayer, they actually fit together. There's just different dimensions. One kind is to make a prayer to Jesus or whoever, your connection to what's sacred. The other, which is a really deep meditation, is called the prayer of listening. Not my will, but thine. Let me listen as deeply as I can to try to feel what's right. And it turns out that quality of loving awareness, of mindfulness, is an invitation to this kind of listening. To start meditation is really learning how to be present. Albert Einstein said, I read it in Scientific American, so I kind of believe it. He said, if you can drive safely while kissing a girl, you're simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves. And of course, it's funny, but we haven't learned what you learned from that doctor about how to pay attention to our bodies very well. We're so busy doing other. We haven't learned to pay attention to listen to our intuition, to our heart. When you get silent and quiet as you did, new understandings will come. It's completely natural. So when I talked to my friend Bill at Ford Motors, I said, here are a few things that you can do. The first, I want you to close your eyes. We did a little meditation together. And I want you to sense right now in the financial meltdown how many people and leaders too are scared? He said, oh, lots of them. I said, and I want you to wrap yourself as you listen to me with a compassion rather than judge it. We're all going through something hard. See what it's like to hold it with kindness rather than judgment or fear. So, oh, okay, already things start to get quieter. That's already a little better. I said, all right, now I want you to feel where you're carrying the anxiety and fear in your body. So keep your eyes closed. And I said, okay, he carries it here and here. And I said, okay, how long has it been carried in there? He said, some of it goes back for years. I said, all right, let's do a practice of sweeping with that kindness, with loving awareness through your body, and feel all the places step by step in your eyebrows, in your head, and your jaw, and your neck, and your shoulders. And we took some time to do it. All the places where you feel the tension has gotten stuck, because it does, and invite it with this loving awareness to soften. And as you sweep through the body, let it go down in like the roots of a tree back into Mother Earth. She can carry it. So we did a practice of releasing some of the tensions, but it had to be done with kindness. Yeah, and I suggested he go outside and find his favorite tree and just stand there and put his hand on it and let the tree teach him. He
You made
did.
him a tree hugger.
And the tree, the tree will tell you, I've been here a long time. There's been storms and winds, and I'm still here. I have roots, and you do too. You can listen to your favorite tree. Then I taught him a practice of loving kindness. I said, all right, and this is one of the great practices to deal with fear, especially, is the principle is to start wherever it's easy. You think of the one or two or three people or beings. It could be your dog if you want, who every time you come home and walk through the door, the tail wags, and they don't judge you. They don't say, okay, you're good or bad. They just love you, right? You think of someone, a child you care about, a dear person, and when you picture them, then you begin to offer them, you could call them prayers or wishes of loving kindness. May you be protected. I picture my daughter now as I talk to you. May you be safe. May you hold yourself in kindness. May your body and mind stay strong. May you find the true happiness amidst everything. And you do that for a while, and then you pick another person you love where it's really natural, where it's easy, and your heart sort of starts to open. Oh, this is kind of nice. I like sending love to a few people that I care about. And then you do an interesting flip, because you imagine now that they could turn their gaze on you. So they're standing there, these two people that you've offered so much love to, and they look at you with the same kindly eyes, and they say, you too, just as you've offered me this kindness, I want you to feel it. And they say, may you be safe and protected. And you imagine them blessing you. May you be filled with compassion for your struggles. May you be steady and healthy and well. And we can't do it for ourselves very easily. Most people find taking care of themselves with love is actually a hard thing to do. Surprising. But if you look at see the eyes of the people I care about, my daughter, or my beloved wife, Trudy, my best friend or whatever, looking back at me, they want this for me. And then I say, all right, now put your hand on your heart and take it in that the people who care about you really want you to feel this. And when your heart starts to open, then in this meditation practice, you begin to add other people that you care about. And more you start to live in a field of love. And then it gets harder, of course, because as you get good at it, which takes a while, it might take some days or weeks, then you start to bring in two groups of people or beings. The first are sort of what are called the more neutral people. And what that means is you pass all these people all day. Some people you may see a lot, and you don't really think about them, nor do you care very much. So I picked the mailman, this guy who'd been delivering my mail for a couple of years. I didn't know him well, but when my heart and loving kindness was opening, then I pictured him, and every day for 3 or 4 minutes, I would send him these prayers: may you be safe and protected and healthy and well. Anyway, it went on. I was doing my practice, because then later you get to difficult people, which is even harder. And I went out one day in my yard, and I saw the mail truck come by, and this guy stepped out of the truck. And I tell you, it was like I'd fallen in love. I said, "Oh, my neutral person, I love this guy," you know. And it's because I'd been visualizing him from the heart for a week before that. And all of a sudden, oh, you too, you're now part of my circle. And you start to feel the power of loving kindness, and it begins to fill you. You become part of that light, if you will. So that's one form of meditation, and especially in these times where there is such collective anxiety, the practice of loving kindness. And it said there's lots of great forms. Sharon Salzberg, my friend, has a great website about it. Tara Brach is another. That you can find all kinds of, but it's in us. So one little tiny aside, there was this 50-year civil war in the country of Colombia between the FARC, the rebels in the jungle, and the government. 50 years of fighting. And one of the last things that the Colombian government forces did in the last days of their conflict, before they mostly resolved it, they took some helicopters, and out of the helicopters, they dropped pictures of the family members of the people that had been living in the jungle. And they hadn't seen their old mom or their kid who'd grown up in the last 8 years they hadn't seen. And they saw these pictures, and they remembered how much they cared.
Mm-hmm.
And it started to remake that bond of love, which led them to say, all right, how do we solve this?
Yeah.
So this is called seeing. You call it loving awareness, mindfulness. It's really seeing with the eyes of love.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Let's breathe that for a second. Jack, you and I likely both know spiritual leaders who kind of have a tension between acceptance and action, between being what is versus working toward change.
Right.
How does your understanding of freedom address these apparent paradoxical moments or thoughts?
Well, it's related to the question you asked before about the misunderstanding of meditation. People think meditation means turning away from the world. But you yourself discovered actually that when you got quiet and invited a sense of stillness and deep listening, it actually connected you more fully with the world. In Zen, they say there are only two things: you sit and you sweep the garden, and it doesn't matter how big the garden is. So you quiet the mind and you open the heart, and then the natural impulse is to get up. And if somebody falls, you help them up. If someone's hungry, you offer them food. Because when you get quiet, that's what the heart wants. It's like breathing in and breathing out. Meditation is not to remove you from the world, but to open you with a sensitivity and a love to the very world that we live in.
Feels like a better connection. Your book, After the Ecstasy, The Laundry,
Yeah,
explores the integration of spiritual awakening with everyday life. And we're sitting here 2 decades later. What are there new or fresh insights that have emerged for you about this integration in our increasingly complex digital world, which we hit on a little bit already?
yeah. Well, thank you for that question too, because The digital world, like every other part of the world, has beauty and suffering, benefit and difficulty. Um, and it's so hard to tease apart. And the way that it's been constructed, which is related to where we started way back with Joanna Macy, is it's primarily been built, the attention economy, to grab your attention. It's been designed. Here's something that will scare you. Here's something that will entice you. How long can we keep you on? Because we get more money if we get your eyeballs, right? And what's happened is that it's been a terrible thing for our teenagers. And we know this now in lots of cases. It's also been beautiful. It's helped them in a lot, but it's also been difficult. And I don't know if you saw that movie, The Social Dilemma, that really describes the cost to, teenage boys and girls about how they see themselves in their body. Everybody swiping, comparing, and looking and messaging, and you lose your own sense of
So
integrity.
am I an outlier, or am I working against the global good cause that I want to work when I say I am uh, an affectionate and passionate supporter of using technology? I think, like water, we can use it to drown or we can use it to solve thirst.
Okay, so here's the problem, JBH. It's not just we, but it's the people who actually design it. Because you could say nuclear power, we could have great electricity everywhere, but it also could be used for bombs, right? And you're not deciding. You're turning on your electric range or your electric lights, and you're way downstream from the people who are designing and making it. And that's true for the online technology. And a lot of it was designed based on greed.
So
Um,
we have to be caretakers. We have to bring care to, as I said earlier, and you're saying now as well, really strongly around how we design it. And
absolutely.
you talked about
Absolutely.
intention being
Yeah, because
so
if
important.
yes, because if AI is designed out of greed, it'll turn into the problems that social media has been for teenagers and other people. There's great potential, but also could cause a lot of suffering. So, and the social media movie shows that this was partly intentional because we can make billions, almost trillions of dollars by getting everybody to watch these things and making it more and more addictive. But we also could use it for the good, which is what you're saying. You say, I'm in. This is the game right now.
It elevated my business, and I pray that we've done it, Jack, in a thoughtful and caring way right now as we measure what we think helps us to get a true and a transparent measurement. We are doing that. You know, every level of advance we make in technology since the wheel, I think, have had plus and minus to us, whether it's to our environment or to each other. The automobile that rushes someone to the hospital for an emergency surgery can also kill someone without care on the path.
Yeah. Yes.
I think we're going to wrestle with this, and that's not a bad thing if we can create enough consciousness around people, because I think the majority of people want things for the good, and I think the majority of people want some of the same things for themselves. Peace and love. And my husband and I went to an opera um, in Georgia, when the Soviet Union was still intact. And we were working with a company that was filming there. And so we went to an opera. And he asked me afterwards, "Did you notice something?" I said, "I noticed a lot of things. It was my first time there. Of course, I noticed." The point that he was getting to for me was, he said, the majority of that audience likely did not understand the language that the opera was sung in, but they understood the circumstances and experiences it was sung from. And he said everybody pulled out their little handkerchiefs and teared up at the same moments, and we all laughed at the same moments. And he said we were using the melodies of the opera to help carry us into the experience that we shared in that room, because we were not all speaking the same language. And I think as we examine the further development of technology, we may not have that luxury of sitting, in a room where we don't understand each other's intentions. And yet we keep designing forward. And I think that may be part of the pedal you're asking us to put pause to and look at and be better thoughtful as we advance into what I think is a relationship age. You talk about those, you can talk about those ages of industry. I think we're in a relationship age now.
So I'm with you in the opera, and I know deeply how much we resonate, and it's deeper than the words. If I play a violin and there's another violin on the table in that same room, and I play the D string, that string on the violin sitting at the table will resonate. We know this.
Yes, yes.
We're connected not just in the physical world, we're connected in a deeper way. So that's also true.
With only 7 notes.
Yeah.
And we continue to create new and beautiful and, experiential melodies from them. Let me ask you this, Jack. So, you believe in practicing forgiveness toward those who have caused significant harm, or anybody we think, forgiveness is intact for, whether that's personal or societal. What distinction helps differentiate between authentic forgiveness versus spiritual bypass or premature forgiveness?
Yeah. Well, people first need to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean forgiving and forgetting. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen or that there wasn't suffering. In the end, it simply means not continuing to carry hatred in your own heart. You may choose to never speak with a person again. You may choose to stand up for justice when it's been wronged, very strongly. But what matters is how you do it. And if you're doing it well, okay, they did it to me, and it becomes a sense of revenge, or you carry it inside, it can eat you away. And forgiveness is rather the capacity to see with the heart of compassion and to somehow not carry hatred, but rather to release that and say, all right, you did what you did. I will stand up to make sure it never happens again to me or anybody else, but I will not hate you. And I had this lesson. One of my great teachers, Ghosananda, he became the head of Buddhism in Cambodia. We were working in the refugee camps during the Cambodian genocide, and there were 500,000 refugees or more that poured into the Thai camps. And this monk and I had lived in a forest in a Buddhist monastery. So he was spared, but all 19 members of his family were killed. His village was burned. It was just, 2 million people died in a country that was only 8 million people. So it was enormous. So we got to the refugee camps, and he asked the UN commissioner there, could he make a little Buddhist temple, which would be a platform and a little altar and a roof over it for people who wanted to make prayers or meditate together. And got permission. We went through the camp with a big gong to invite people to come. There were 50 or 100,000 people in this one camp. And underground, the Khmer Rouge, who'd been they'd caused the genocide. They said, if we see anybody going to this temple, when you get back to Cambodia, you will all be shot. So we didn't think very many people would come, but we rang the gong, and 25,000 people streamed from the camp, and they were all there. And this one, little guy in a orange robe sat there, and I thought, all right, what can he say to people who've lost so much? And there would be a grandmother and her 2 surviving grandchildren, the faces of trauma, or an uncle and one nephew. And he put his hands together and he began this ancient Buddhist chant that goes, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law. And he started to chant it over and over and over again. And they hadn't heard these words because they were forbidden by the Khmer Rouge. And then slowly people picked it up. And after a while, 25,000 people were chanting, hatred never ends by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient eternal law. And what he did in the face of that immense suffering was to speak a truth, a human truth or a spiritual truth. It's what Jesus taught. That's even bigger than the suffering. Yes, I see you're suffering. I've suffered. Everyone I care about suffered. And this, I will not let it colonize my heart. I will not live with a heart of hatred. And he then went on. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize. He led all these peace walks back, leading people back into Cambodia, chanting that verse. So it's partly, how do we hold all this, JBH? And the fact is that we have the capacity as human beings to be noble. When you see Nelson Mandela come out of 27 years in Robben Island prison, and you say, you know, they could put my body in prison, but no one could take my spirit. Yeah. No one could take it. And that's really what we're talking about. Who will you be? And you know this in yourself. You have this capacity. We all do.
Jack, when we consider, and you've likely heard both sayings, on the one hand, that those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it, whether we collected that or whether we isolate it to ourselves, it's.
Sure.
And then there's also saying, and I used to hear this a lot growing up in the South, if you haven't forgotten it, you haven't forgiven it. I don't know that those are opposite each other. They are different ways of expressing the full.
They're not. You don't forgive doesn't mean forgive and forget. You remember and you stand up for what matters and you say, I will not allow this to happen again. Mm-hmm. And I will not carry the hatred in my heart. Mm-hmm. And we haven't learned in some way one of the great curriculums of our human life is how the heart can bear the suffering with dignity and with love and with understanding, because we'll all have a certain measure of it. James Baldwin said at one point, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate and ignorance so stubbornly is because they sense that once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their own pain. And what he's saying, even for our culture, he's speaking about our cultural fear, that a lot of the hatred here, the immigrants, the communists, the brown, the black, the whatever, the people, all that kind of fear is really our insecurity. I'll lose who I am. I'll lose my status. I'll lose my whatever. So we're afraid and we can't deal with that insecurity and pain. And so we blame, when I was a kid, it was the communists all the time. They're coming. They're the bad people. Now it's the Mexicans but it's the enemy du jour. It's just the next filler in that space that you should be afraid of, rather than you can't actually understand that we're in this together. And of course it's insecure. What's not, the outer things, what's not insecure is your love, your integrity, your dignity. No one, like Nelson, they can put my body in prison, but no one can imprison my spirit. And when you feel that, then you can live in a different way in this culture.
Yeah, and he spoke beautifully about winners and losers too, didn't he? Where I think he said something to the effect of, I never lose. I either win or I learn. Such a positive approach to how one who does go through suffering can come out of it and have victory in their own life. The transformation of difficult emotions represents a cornerstone of your own teaching, Jack. Which emotional patterns proved most tenacious in your own development? You talked about the guy in orange coming out and starting a chant that 25,000 people led him toward the Nobel Prize. What practice finally brought genuine freedom in relationship to your own development?
Well, I want to answer that because it's an honorable question. I mean, it's all fine to get up on your, spiritual high horse. And I'm in the spiritual industry, right? So I see a lot of people get up on their high horses, um, you know. But it's another to say, well, how about your own life? How do how have you dealt with it? But before I answer it, I'm looking for a story that I want to read to you. Um, and I read it. I think I'll find it here soon. Let me see if I took it out. Um, I was honored to be part of a women's group at Alice Walker's in Berkeley.
Mm-hmm,
There
mm-hmm.
were 10 women who had come together, and they wanted to learn meditation. And one was a professor at Berkeley. They were all very high powered and accomplished women. Um, and they somehow, they adopted me. I was like their pet or something for a while. And I was one of the great, happiness of my life that I was able to be there and be there with them for a number of years. And I just love these women. So I read them this story one time. Where the heck is it? Come on. And Alice was so taken with it, she brought it to the United Nations when it was her turn. And it was about a group of people in South Africa called the Babemba people. And it says, when someone maybe I'll just tell it if I can't find it. In the Babemba community, if someone does something egregious and wrong and harms other people, all work in the community stops. The community leaders call the community together, and then they take that person and they ask him or her to stand in the middle of the circle of the community, and then they spend as much time as they can asking every person in the community to remember every single good deed or good moment from that person's life. So there they are, and they've done whatever bad thing that needs forgiveness. And instead they gather around in this circle and they recite every possible good deed that's happened. And only when that's done, every incident, every experience in detail, their positive attributes, their kindnesses from when they were little, it usually takes a couple of days. Then the circle, they gather, they hold their hands, and they invite that person to join in the circle again. And they're symbolically and literally welcome back into the community. So it's not denial. It's not saying it didn't happen. It affected us all. We need you to stand in the middle and feel this. But that's not who you are. We see who you really are. And that transforms people. Now, here's a little PS to the story, which makes it kind of interesting. So Alice took that beautiful story and read it at the United Nations. And then somebody came to me and said, I don't think it's true. I don't think the Babemba do it. I think it's an artifact of the internet. It's fake news. Somebody made it up. Well, I had a friend at Berkeley who was doing his Ph.D. He'd been born in East Africa. He spoke Shona. He was part of that community. So I went to talk to him and he said, well, I don't know if they do it or not, but one of my close friends is a great Babemba shaman, leader, medicine person. and I'll email him. I'll send him the story.
Mm.
And if they don't do it, I did send it to him. He said, we don't do exactly like that, but I think we'll try it out.
I love that. I love that so much. And, regardless of where that question was coming from about whether they do it or they don't, the beauty of it being done is so strong. We've got so many people today who quite blatantly describe feeling like some type of divine homesickness or
Yeah.
longing that drives a spiritual search. What perspective do you think you can give to help anybody distinguish between unhealthy escapism versus authentic spiritual yearning? And I'll share with you a quick story to frame why that is important to me. I am, as I said, a Christian, and I do meditate. And I don't throw mine out there on people, nor do I cloak it in a closet. Our children watched how we lived at home and took us
Yes.
into the common spaces of community. When our son was very young, I think he was about the fourth grade, he was he was caught up one day by one of his friends who said, "Brett, why are you always praying?" He was saying grace before he ate his lunch.
Sure.
And he said, "Oh, well, I told my parents that you do that." And they respected us as a family and they loved their children coming to our home, etc. And he said, they said, "Oh, forgive Brett. It's just a crutch. Christians use their faith as a crutch." And I asked him, "Well, how did you reply, Brett? Did you reply?" He said, "I told him, well, sometimes people are broken and they need a crutch." He was in the fourth grade then. And I thought, well, that's a beautiful answer, Brett. Do you think it's a crutch? He said, "It doesn't matter if it's a crutch or not. It works for me." And I love how, you're a shaman. It
It
will,
works.
it
Oh,
works
it's
for me.
such a beautiful story
People are
of your boy.
hungry, Jack. People are hungry. They have a homesickness for a place that maybe they've never been to before. When people join our company, I send a letter to them and say, "Welcome home," and I get so many comments back that that's what they feel like after that first week or so of
So
being.
I'm going to put two of your questions together because you may have noticed that I skipped over your personal question about my life
You
because
did.
because I wanted to tell the Babemba story, but I promised I'd get back to it. And these two questions come together because part of what was really difficult for me was I had outwardly some success. I'd written some books and started centers and so forth. Um, but in intimate and personal relations, I felt very insecure. I was insecure since being a teenager. My twin brother was a football player. He was in this huge high school. He was the king in The King and I in our senior play. He could sing and act and so forth. I played oboe in the orchestra. He had all these girlfriends. I was jealous of that. I didn't have any. And I thought there's something wrong with me. You know how we do.
There's nothing wrong with you, Jack.
Well, thank you. Thank you. But it took me, you know, many decades. Anyway, I lived with that for a long time. And I also got into some relationships that weren't very healthy
Mhm.
because I thought if I take care of this person, they'll love me enough and then I'll feel good about myself.
Mhm.
And, yes, I could sit in front of lots of people and lead loving kindness, but for myself, it was really hard. All
Mm.
right. So that's the first part of an answer to your question. Uh,
Physician wasn't taking your own medicine at that.
exactly, exactly. Physician, heal thyself.
Mm.
Exactly. And it's the hardest medicine. We had this meeting of global spiritual teachers and everybody, love everyone and so forth. And then we said, and the Dalai Lama was part of it, we said, okay, but what about these people, who have a lot of self-hatred?
Mm.
And he said he couldn't understand it. There isn't a word for self-hatred in Tibetan. He had to go back and forth with his translator in Tibetan. He said, self-hatred? Finally, he kind of understood it. And he looked and he sort of got tears in his eyes. He said, but this is a mistake. You don't, it's like saying you're children of God, you've forgotten it. So there is a practice, and there's actually a tradition, it's quite beautiful, called mindful self-compassion. And half the people that I know could benefit by it. And it has a series of trainings and practices. One is holding yourself with kindness. The second is a practice called common humanity. Because when you think about, well, I have pimples, or I got irritated or angry, or I did this, whatever, that's the tiny things. Or the really bad things, the worst things you did. You're not alone. We all have struggled. We all still struggle, actually. And there's a whole practice, this sense that we're together with everybody else and we can hold each other. And instead of revile and judge, we can say, oh, your heart softens. Humanity, we're trying to learn this. This is our lesson. So you learn how to hold yourself with compassion, you learn common humanity, and then you learn practices that really change your heart. So I recommend it. You can look at it online. There is also something really powerful about learning this in community, that it's very hard to learn by yourself. And of course, the churches know that at their best. There's some gorgeous coming together of the spirit, and it's there in a Hindu temple, and it's there in, if you go into a village and with the indigenous elders, the Native Americans, the African tribes, they know we need to come together. So I was leading a kind of a retreat, some teaching with a couple of my colleagues, extraordinary colleagues. One is Luis Rodriguez, who's a great Latin poet. He wrote a book called La Vida Loca, My Gang Days in LA, which was a big bestseller, and he says proudly is the most stolen book in high school libraries across the country. And he's worked in prisons, he's done all this. His ministry is beautiful as a poet. And Michael Mead, who's a drummer and mythologist and great teacher. Anyway, we were leading a retreat. We started for a group of kids who were coming out of street gangs in LA, Oakland, Chicago. So we're sitting there with them, and they're sitting in the back with their hoods up, kind of like, okay, man, somehow our elders, our leaders said, we got to come to this thing, and you got some meditation, you're going to read us some damn poem. I'm on the street, people got guns. You got to give me something better than a poem, right? So you could feel this tension. And then we realized that we couldn't start with them, and said, we can't begin to have a real conversation because there are too many dead people in this room that haven't been honored. Would you go out in the parking lot and collect a stone for every young person who's been shot or killed? And some of these kids came in with their hands full of stones. And we put one candle on a table, right? Just one candle. And we said, when you come back in, put the stone by this candle, the light, and say the name. This is for Tito, and this is for RJ, and this is for Homegirl, and say their name. And we watched these young people come back in and put this pile of stones around the candle and say these names. And then we got quiet. The hoods came down. They leaned forward, and Luis read a poem about, shooting up in the viaducts of LA and the gangs that he was, in, and what he had to learn. And everybody listened because their hearts were open. They realized, oh, this is a place where we can talk about the stuff that no one else lets us talk about. So this capacity to be together, it's where that poem where I started in the tire repair shop, that loving awareness, I see your tears and I appreciate them. Um, there are two kinds of tears that you find in meditation. One are the personal tears that you have to weep from the things you've been through. And then there's another kind of tear, which is what I see in you. And they're called the tears of the way, the tears of the path, the spiritual path. And they're not because somebody's hurt you, but when your heart opens, you start to feel what everybody's going through. And that tenderness opens, and it's a different kind of tears. And it gives you the courage in some way to say, I can bear this. I won't turn my gaze away, and I'll do something. It's like, do you know Greg Boyle, Father Greg Boyle in LA? He runs Homeboy Industries.
Yes.
He's
Everybody knows Homeboy Industries.
a dear friend. And, um, he turned toward what was difficult. He said, everybody's turning away from these. He said, they're kids. Somebody has to love them. And that's what he did, what he does.
Jack, wow. Your collaborative work with neuroscientists like Dr. Van Siegel
Yes.
explores the intersection of contemplative practice and brain science. What discovery from this dialogue between wisdom traditions and science has delighted you, especially given the conversation we've
Yeah,
been
thank you for
journeying
this too,
today?
Baby H. Almost every spiritual tradition has meditations. You don't have to be I'm a Buddhist to meditate. Spare your friends and family. You can remain a Christian. You can be agnostic. You can be, connected to indigenous wisdom or Sufi or Jewish or whatever it is, Muslim, doesn't matter where your faith is. The wise parts of all traditions have learned for thousands of years that it helps us. Not only can we quiet our minds and tend our hearts, but we can listen and learn inside just as we learn outside. We can learn how to deal with our fears and confusion and learn to see more clearly, learn to love, learn forgiveness without losing what matters to us, without, losing our standing up. We can learn all these kind of things. So that's, and in that way, what's happened in the last 30 years, and I'm on the board of this organization called Mind and Life Institute, that has supported scientific research, neuroscience, into mindfulness and meditation and loving awareness for 30 years. There are now 10,000 scientific papers published that say the heart and the mind, the brain, can be trained. You can practice compassion. You can learn loving kindness. You can find equanimity. You can learn this great peace. And there are ways to do it in yourself, like I was trying to teach Bill Ford.
Is that aligning with your teachings on the inner garden of the heart, where you say the landscape of our lives and our world are really shaped sometimes by what's going on and how we
Yes, what
cultivate the
seeds you
inner gardens
plant.
when we
Yes.
face
What do
external?
you water in your heart? What will grow is
Yes.
what you water. And all these neuroscientists in their research trying to say, does this work? Well, first of all, after the first 2,000 or 3,000, yeah, it works. It changes people. They're more balanced. They're grounded. They're more steady. They're kinder. They're more compassionate. And then they got more refined. What are the practices that touch the heart? What are the healing practices for the body? Humanity is known for a long time that where we place our loving attention also affects the healing of our body. You learned that the first day with your doctor and acupuncturist.
In my office, I've said this publicly, Jack. The most precious, expensive thing I have in my office is about this big. And in it is just something I wrote down. We get our results from where we place our attention. And that has meant so many different things to different people who've come into my office and noticed it, and they share a relationship to it, or something they've done, or something they're going through, or let me write this down and share it with my son or daughter. Lately, people are so scared, Jack. Is the state of fear, or the place of being scared, is that an expression of the heart, or is that the mind
So, so
fighting the
it's
heart?
the fear. Fear is really your alarm system, okay? And it's trying to protect you. The problem is that it gets triggered. You know, it's like your car alarm. Have you ever been in the city
Yeah,
and
yeah.
people's car alarm, and then you can't turn the damn thing off?
Right, right.
And people are living with the inner car alarm, you know, blaring a lot, and it's painful and it's really unhealthy. It puts your body into fight, flight, or freeze. You go into kind of the panic. Mark Mark Twain said, "My life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened."
Mm,
All right.
mm.
So a lot of that fear is the imagination, you know, they're coming to get me. I'll lose everything. No one, whatever, all that. It's in the mind. And then the body goes into the fear responses, right? The trauma and fear responses. The beautiful thing is there are practices that turn down the alarm. The practice of loving kindness that I was just teaching a little bit of, that turns down the alarm. There's a practice of making a peaceful heart where you visualize the most peaceful place you've been. You add the words, may I live in peace and harmony with all things. You sweep through your body and feel that peace touching your cells. Then you envision the elders of peace, the women, you know, in Liberia. I think it was Ellen Sirleaf and Lehman Gabowi who got the Nobel Peace Prize. They said Liberia used to be known for its child soldiers, and now it's known for its women leaders worldwide. That you realize that you have the capacity through practice to transform the thoughts in your heart. It doesn't mean fear goes away. In fact, the fear is there. You feel it in your body. You turn to it and you say, "Thank you. Thank you for trying to protect me. I'm okay. You can stand down. You can relax." Because there you are lying in bed and you're worried about you know, your money 10 years in the future. Will I be able to retire? And are the Russians coming? And, you know, what's happening?
Am I going to
That's
be grabbed at the grocery store?
right. It's not going to help you sleep. It's not going to help anything.
Mm.
So you say, "Thank you for trying to take care of me. Fear, I hold you in kindness, respectfully. I'm okay." And it's almost like you put the fear, maybe you put it in Jesus' lap. "Okay, Jesus, you carry the fear for a while. I want to get a good night's sleep." And Jesus said, "Not a problem. You know,
My,
give me."
my husband used to tease me oftentimes about my faith, and he did share with me once that when we were saying, "Oh, if you could experience jealousy, what would it be?" And he told me, I told him what I would, and then he told me his. He said, "If I could experience jealousy, it would be, I'm jealous of your simple and beautiful faith." Then he said, um, "But I'm not jealous of the fact that you call Jesus all the time and you're always calling for the same thing. Is Jesus really that dumb? He didn't get it the first time." And he teased me, or he'd say things, Jack, like, if worrying paid, I'd be the wealthiest person on earth before I were 35. It didn't.
Yeah,
So I stopped
yeah,
doing that. I decided to just work it out, you know.
yeah.
And I'm so grateful for the investment of time you're giving us, the family here, and helping us work it out. I am.
Well, I want to ask because we have to wind down at some point. I'm not in a hurry, but I think you probably have to end it at some point.
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I just don't want to. I don't want to linger
Don't worry. I want to ask the people that we're speaking to,
our
who
family.
you who you call your family,
Hmm.
right? Your family members. I want to ask them to take a pause as we're just talking together. Take a few breaths. It's always a good thing, and kind of settle down. Ah, nothing's quiet. And then ask yourself as you listen, what is it in my body that's asking for more kindness? And you'll know, your body will answer you. You know, what's the wisdom this body wants to say? What asks for kindness? And then you can do that a little bit. And then as you get quiet, you can ask, what I've been carrying in my heart that asked to be let go of or to be held in love, what needs a loving attention so that it can, soften, I can live with ease. What do I have to love? Even that. And your heart will answer. It's called, and the Sufis call it Sobet, which is called a conversation with your own heart. So that's, the thing is we can know it right away. It's not like you have to go on a, pilgrimage to some sacred place and do a, days and months of retreat. You just have to get quiet and listen.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Are you ready to go 4 for 4, Jack?
Am I ready to go what?
4 for 4. I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, well, I read about your 4 for 4.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Let's do
I'm not sure. I'll do the books anyway.
that.
I'll
Okay.
do, we'll talk. Okay.
Okay. So listen, Jack,
Yeah.
you get to host a dinner. You tell me who the 4 people are at your dinner, and they can be dead or to this moment. I prefer they be human and not humanoid, but that's your choice.
Well, I kind of want Nelson Mandela there, you know, and wouldn't mind having the Dalai Lama too. Um, yeah, I'd like to have my wife Trudy, who's an amazing spiritual teacher. I couldn't imagine having the dinner without her being there together,
Mm.
you know. Um, yeah, and I'm thinking about so many other, the poet Sappho, who was the great Greek poet from thousands of years ago, or you know, the poet Rumi, he'd be all right. Or I'd like, oh God, there's so many. I'm sorry, my dinner's just going to have more people.
Well, those first 4 you named were quite impressive.
Yeah, yeah, okay,
So likely I could guess on this one, but I won't. I really would
yeah.
like you to share. What 4 pieces of music are you listening to right now, and why these days?
Um, I'm not directing my music listening. My beloved Trudy is much more connected to music across every genre, from Johann Sebastian Bach to really good hip hop and rap. So I listen to her mixes and Spotify, and I just let it pick for me. The thing is that almost all of it, if it's good, is great. And I'm having fun because I'm working on a book project with this music producer Rick Rubin, um, on creativity, and he's telling me stories about all the different musicians he works with, and we're really talking about where does the musical inspiration come, and it actually doesn't come from us. This is like meditation. We hear it. The beautiful, great musicians you love, they hear it and then they write it down. It comes from the divine, the universe.
It's a
So
gift.
that's the music. There you are.
It's so interesting that you mentioned Rick Rubin, because a gentleman I talked with earlier today said Rick Rubin was someone he wanted to have at his dinner table. So we're all interested, connected in a
Yeah, we're all going to have dinner together. I
way.
like it.
Yeah, yeah.
I would, yeah.
What
Okay.
4 books? This will be probably one that's hard for you to narrow down a little bit as well. What 4 books do you recommend our family read in these days, especially framed around the thought that people are working from a lot of fear, whether fear is the right place for them to be or not? And
So there are two ways of talking about it. I recommend Pema Chodron's When Things Fall Apart
mm,
because it's so wise.
mhm.
I also recommend Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, where it's a very small little book where he talks about the 20 things that can happen to change a democracy into a tyrannical state and what you can do about it.
I'm
And
making a note of When Things Fall Apart.
yeah, When Things Fall Apart is great, Pema Chodron. And then on tyranny from Timothy Snyder. I'm also going to recommend the Book of Joy. And the Book of Joy is a conversation between Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama about why they can be happy in the face of so much suffering. You know, Tutu in apartheid, so many people he loved and knew were killed, so much suffering, and for the Dalai Lama, the loss of Tibet, he can't even go back, and the monasteries burned, and, the sacred texts are thrown, into the river, and um, so many things. And somebody asked him, how can you be happy? Tutu just laughs. And the Dalai Lama says, they've taken so many things from me, the temples, the texts, why should I let them take my happiness?
That is something I've been teaching on for the last few years, and it started, I think, during the onset of COVID. And I've been telling people, nobody deserves to take your happiness. Nobody has the right to take your happiness. And my mom used to tell us it's a choice. We used to wonder, and people would wonder, adults would wonder out loud, Jack, in our presence, why is Miss Elretha always singing? Because I can't remember a day, and my siblings, when our mother wasn't singing in the house. We typically sing songs of joy, etc. I've examined the songs I remember her singing now that I'm older and why she chose those songs. But I'm talking about a woman who birthed 11 children, one husband, one father, and and she did so uh, as an African American in the South in a highly racist economy. People talk about societies. It was a racist economy for her, and she always had a smile on her face, and she always sang. And she was one of the most aware people I knew. So why was Mama singing? And she used to tell us, don't let people take your, nobody deserves to take your joy. Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's go 4 for 4, and then I'm going to let you go. What 4 pieces of advice do you give our family today? And if it's advice that was shared to you from someone else, please pay homage to the author.
Well, the first is um, in any situation that's difficult, take a pause and a breath. Take 30 seconds and ask yourself, what's my highest intention? What's my best intention? And the heart will listen. Then Mary Oliver, poet, says, in this life, there are 3 things you must learn: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your breast, knowing your life depends on it, and when it's time to let it go, to let it go. And that's her deep poet way of saying, give yourself to life, live it fully, and also learn to let go.
That was really difficult for me when my husband transitioned during COVID, not of COVID. He wasn't perfect, but he was perfect for me. And that was
That's all. And we're not, so that's the next one. The idea is not to perfect yourself. It's to perfect your love. There's a million other things I could say, hatred never ceases. But I'll tell you one that I use in wedding ceremonies,
okay.
because there they are, and I don't do that anymore, but I used to a bunch, and there they are, and the bride so beautiful and the groom is standing up so handsome and all that, or the two grooms and two brides, whatever, however they're doing it. And they have their vows. They're about to take their vows. And I ask them to recite their vows to each other. And I say, before you recite your vows, I have a question to ask you both. When you go into the used car lot, in the window of the used cars, there's often a sign that says, as is. You've probably seen that, all right? JBH. I say, I want you to look at each other, and I ask you, each one, do you take this person as is? Because if we go into a relationship thinking we're going to fix somebody and change them, it's a recipe for unhappiness. But when we can see with the eyes of love, the point isn't to perfect yourself, it's to perfect your love. Do you take them as is? They respond really well to that, it turns out. And they might even become a little more noble and wonderful because you love them so much.
Wow. Hey, that's a mic drop in Rick Rubin's conversation. That's a mic drop. Wow. Thank you so, so much, Jack.
Well, this has been a pleasure. First, it's a pleasure to get to know you and hear about you and your work. And also because I suspect your family is not necessarily, it's adjacent to my circle, but it's not in it. And so I'm really glad if I said anything that touches anybody's heart and reminds you of who you really are, that innate dignity and beauty that it was born in you. Carry that, baby, because that's who you are.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And you are welcome to our family, and you are welcome back anytime home.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.